What if the reason you can't throw things away has nothing to do with laziness and everything to do with a survival instinct hardwired into your brain? Because right now, somewhere in your home, there is an object you haven't touched in over a year, and your brain would rather let it collect dust forever than allow you to throw it away. The reason why is far more disturbing than you think. This is not another video about cleaning tips or minimalism hacks. This goes much deeper, and by the end you might realize that the clutter in your room is not a sign of weakness. It's a symptom of something your brain has been doing to you without your permission. Let's start with a scene you probably know too well. You wake up one morning and declare, "Today is the day. Today I finally get my life together." You swing open your closet doors with the determination of a warrior heading into battle. But the moment you pick up a single shirt, something strange happens. Your body freezes. Your mind whispers, "I might wear this someday." And just like that, the shirt goes right back into the drawer. An hour later, instead of a clean room, you're lying on top of a bigger mess than you started with, scrolling through your phone in defeat. The desire to declutter is burning inside you. So why do you keep stalling at the exact same point every single time? Is it simply because you're lazy? Or is your brain actually engineered to never let go? The answer is far more disturbing than you think. Let me introduce you to someone. Her name is Una. For years, Una worked as a freelance photographer in Seoul. Her tiny studio apartment doubled as her workspace, and over the years it filled up. Old camera lenses she no longer used, stacks of printed portfolios from projects long finished, gifts from ex-partners she hadn't spoken to in years, clothes that hadn't fit since college. Una knew, logically, that most of it was useless. But every time she tried to clean, a wave of invisible resistance crashed over her. She would pick up an old lens, remember the first wedding she ever shot with it, and carefully place it back on the shelf. She told herself she was preserving memories, but what she was really doing was drowning in them. Una's story is not unique, it is universal, and psychology explains exactly why. There is a concept in psychology called the endowment effect. Put simply, the moment something becomes yours, your brain irrationally inflates its value. The Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman, along with researchers Jack Netsch and Richard Thaler, demonstrated this with an elegantly simple experiment. They handed out ordinary coffee mugs to a group of college students. Then they asked, "How much would you sell this mug for?" The results were stunning. The students demanded nearly twice the price that buyers were willing to pay. Just minutes earlier, that mug meant absolutely nothing to them. But the instant it became theirs, it transformed into something precious. That shirt buried at the bottom of your closet for 3 years works exactly the same way. Objectively, it's outdated and unworn, but because it's yours, your brain makes it feel irreplaceable. But it doesn't stop there. On top of the endowment effect, another psychological chain wraps itself around you: the sunk cost fallacy. This is the powerful illusion that throwing something away means losing the money you paid for it. Imagine a $40 skincare product sitting on your shelf. You've never used it because it irritates your skin. You know you will never use it, but you can't throw it away because your brain screams, "I paid $40 for that." Here's the truth. That $40 is already gone. Whether you keep the product or toss it, that money is never coming back. But your brain doesn't process it that way. The moment you move to throw it in the trash, your brain makes you feel as though you are losing that $40 all over again, right now, in real time. Your present decision gets hijacked by a cost that has already passed. Miwa Sahara, one of Japan's most respected psychology-based decluttering consultants, who has guided hundreds of clients through the emotional process of letting go, identified this pattern with piercing clarity. She observed that the word wasteful is almost never really about the object. It is about the person's refusal to accept that a past decision didn't work out. The desire to protect the story of, "I chose this, and it was a good choice." In other words, what we are hoarding is not stuff. We are hoarding a version of our past selves. And beneath all of this lies the most primal force of all: loss aversion. Neuroscience research has shown that the pain of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. A research team led by Professor Brian Knudsen at Stanford University gave participants desirable gadgets in cash. Then, inside a brain imaging scanner, they offered various prices and asked, "Would you sell?" At that moment, the right anterior insula, a brain region that processes loss and physical pain, lit up intensely. The participants had owned these items for mere minutes, but the instant something became theirs, the act of giving it up registered in the brain as genuine physical suffering. So here's the full picture. The endowment effect inflates the value of what you own. The sunk cost fallacy chains you to what you've already spent. And loss aversion floods your body with the fear that letting go will hurt. All three activate simultaneously the moment you stand in front of your closet. That is why no amount of willpower has ever been enough. You were never fighting clutter. You were fighting your own neurobiology. If this is changing the way you see your clutter, take a second to hit subscribe, because what comes next might change how you think about your entire living space. But here's where it gets even worse. Because the damage isn't just psychological, it's physical. You might be thinking, can I just live with it? What's the big deal if I have a few extra things lying around? The answer to that question is genuinely alarming. Researchers at Princeton University's Neuroscience Institute conducted a fascinating experiment. They asked participants to focus on a single task while gradually increasing the number of unrelated objects in their visual field. What they observed in the visual cortex was remarkable. As the surrounding clutter increased, neurons began competing with each other for attention, essentially screaming, "Look at me!" all at once. The brain's capacity to focus on the actual task plummeted. You might think, but I'm used to my mess. It doesn't even bother me anymore. That, it turns out, is precisely the problem. Your brain has a filtering system, often discussed in neuroscience as part of the reticular activating system. It screens out familiar stimuli so you stop consciously noticing them. That's why you can walk past the same pile of clothes every day and feel like it doesn't exist. But just because your conscious mind ignores it doesn't mean your brain stops processing it. At the subconscious level, your brain is still expending enormous energy cataloging every single object in your space. It's exactly like having dozens of apps running in the background of your phone, silently draining your battery. You can't see them, but by the end of the day, you're inexplicably exhausted and your head feels heavy. And this is more than just a focus problem. It is a health crisis hiding in plain sight. UCLA's Center on Everyday Lives of Families tracked 32 dual-income households as part of a multi-year ethnographic study. They asked participants to film and narrate a tour of their own homes, then linguistically analyze the language they used. A striking pattern emerged. Mothers who described their homes using words associated with clutter, disorder, or incompleteness showed cortisol levels that remained elevated throughout the entire day. Cortisol is your body's primary stress hormone. Under normal conditions, it peaks in the morning and gradually declines toward evening, allowing your body to wind down and sleep peacefully. But for those living in cluttered homes, that decline never properly happened. Their cortisol stayed high well into the night. Meanwhile, those who described their homes as restful and calm showed the healthy, natural downward curve. What does this mean? A cluttered room is not just visually unpleasant. Simply sitting in it places your body in a low-grade state of emergency all day, every day, like a quiet alarm that never stops ringing in the background. When this repeats day after day, sleep quality deteriorates, fatigue accumulates, and eventually, it can open the door to depression. Remember Yuna? After years of living buried in her belongings, she noticed she had stopped inviting anyone over. She worked from her cluttered apartment, slept in it, and spent weekends in it. surrounded by the relics of a life she was no longer living. She didn't realize it, but her space had become an archive of past identities, and it was quietly suffocating the person she was trying to become. So all those things you've been holding on to, out of sentiment, out of guilt, out of a vague sense that they still matter, they weren't preserving your memories. They were slowly, silently consuming your focus, your energy, and your health. You thought you were protecting your possessions, but the thing that actually needed protecting was you. Miwa Sahara captured this perfectly. She wrote that people who struggle to declutter don't lack organizational skills. They are emotionally tethered to the past. Every object has a former version of themselves clinging to it, so throwing it away feels like erasing who they once were. So what do we do now? You understand the problem, but you still can't let go. Of course you can't. Your brain was literally built this way. That's why the solution is not to squeeze out more willpower. It is to fundamentally change the lens through which you see your belongings. After guiding hundreds of decluttering sessions, Miwa Sahara arrived at one core realization. No matter how many organizing techniques a person learns, if their mindset hasn't shifted, they always end up right back where they started. That's why her approach is rooted in Adlerian psychology. Adler's most essential principle is this: the past does not determine the present. Rather, the future you desire determines the choices you make right now. Applied to decluttering, this transforms the question entirely. I paid a lot for it. That's a reason anchored in the past. I might use it someday. That's a vague anxiety about a future that will likely never arrive. Neither has anything to do with the life you are living right now. Instead, ask yourself this: what kind of room do I want to live in from now on? That single question shifts the spotlight from the object back to you. Building on this shift, here are 3 concrete methods you can use starting today. The first is the repurchase test. Pick up an object and ask yourself, if I didn't already own this, would I spend my own money to buy it right now? This question shatters the endowment effect's illusion. You will be stunned by how easily things leave your hands once you ask it. The second is the 5-minute reset habit. Most people think decluttering means blocking off half a day for a massive cleanout. But Sahara draws a crucial distinction between organizing and resetting. Organizing means assigning every object a home. Resetting means simply returning each item to that home after use. Once you've designated a place for everything, your daily effort shrinks to a 5-minute reset. Repeat this for just 3 weeks and it becomes an automatic habit. Your body moves without your mind even having to think. The third is the shift from subtracting to selecting. Don't hunt for things to throw away. Instead, choose what genuinely adds value to your life. When you approach the process as, what should I get rid of? Your brain activates loss aversion and becomes defensive. But when you ask, what gives me energy? Your brain switches to a positive framework. Once you've selected the things you truly love, letting go of the rest happens naturally. You're not discarding, you're curating. That difference may sound small, but when you're actually standing in front of a drawer, it changes everything. Research from the University of Minnesota supports this. People who spent time in an orderly environment were significantly more likely to choose a healthy snack compared to those in cluttered spaces. When your space changes, your choices change. When your choices change, your entire day changes. You tidy one room, and somehow your whole life starts to feel a little more aligned. Let me bring this full circle. Yuna eventually reached a breaking point. Not a dramatic one, just a quiet Tuesday evening when she looked around her apartment and realized she couldn't find a single surface to set down a cup of tea. She didn't start with a big purge. She started with one drawer. She picked up each item and asked, would I buy this again today? Most of the time the answer was no. Over the following weeks, boxes left her apartment one by one, and something unexpected happened. With each object that left, she didn't feel loss. She felt lighter. For the first time in years, she could breathe in her own home. She started inviting friends over again. She began shooting photographs not for old clients, but for herself. The space she had freed up in her room had somehow freed up space in her mind. Letting go is not an act of losing. It is the act of making room for yourself in a space that had been occupied by things. It is not about denying who you were. It is the courage to choose who you are right now. What if you emptied just one thing today? A single drawer, a single shelf, even one object. That small, empty space will give you more room to breathe than you expect. And in the place where that object used to sit, you might finally begin to see someone you haven't seen in a long time. Yourself. Because the thing you really need to let go of might not be the object at all. It might be the old belief that without your things, you can't prove who you are. Thank you for watching Mindgrove.